Welcome to Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. On this podcast, we journey through the devastating experience of the death of a child. Grief is seldom discussed openly in our culture, and the death of a child makes people feel even more uncomfortable. We approach the topic openly and honestly, speaking to people who have lost loved ones and experts who help care for them. Whether you are a parent experiencing loss or someone who wants to support another going through this tragedy, this podcast strives to offer hope and help.
Welcome to episode 129 of Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. I'm Marcy Larson, Andy's mom. I don't know if all of you believe in divine intervention or not, but I certainly do. And today's guest, I feel like, was put into my life through divine intervention. Through God and Andy somehow working together to get her to send a message to me, to reach out to me. I feel like we are similar souls, and our mission really for our lives moving forward after the loss of our children really are very much the same. So I am so excited to introduce you to Amanda, Hudson's mom, also known as Buzzy's mom. Enjoy. Thank you so much, Amanda, for agreeing to come on the Always Andy's Mom podcast. I'm so excited to have you on.
Absolutely, of course. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. I just have to start out by recounting the story of how we got connected. So just because it's so meaningful to me, and I may actually even get a little bit emotional about it, just because it meant a lot. So Amanda wrote to me now maybe a month and a half ago about her organization. And the organization, the formal name, I don't want to get this wrong. It was Buzzy's
Bees.
Buzzy's Bees. Okay?
Yes.
Buzzy's Bees. So this hit me unbelievably because my son Andy's favorite book was called Buzzy the Bumblebee. And I'm going to hold up a copy. So if you're watching on video, here is the copy of the book, Buzzy the Bumblebee. And Andy loved this book, and we read it all the time. When he was in, I think, first grade, he had to dress up as a character in a book, and we dressed him up as Buzzy the Bumblebee. I still have the Bumblebee costume up in the bedroom. I mean, for me, when I read Buzzy's Bees, it just was like, it was 100% Andy, and I felt like, this is meant to be. Like, I need to talk to this woman because anyone who just named an organization Buzzy's Bees has got to be pretty awesome. And I felt like it was like orchestrated by Andy somehow from above to have this happen and for you to reach out. So again, and now I'm all crying, but it just means a lot. And I am so excited to talk to you.
Yes, likewise. Yes, when Marcy responded, she was so quick saying, you know what? I have chills, and explaining about the book, and I'd never seen the book. We've had the organization for about 5 years now. And I immediately ordered like 4 copies on the plane because I'm not crazy.
It is a sweet book too, isn't it?
It is so sweet.
It is a sweet book. So the book of Buzzy the Bumblebee is that Buzzy's a bumblebee and he's leading this wonderful little life until suddenly he learns the scientific fact that he should not be able to fly. That bumblebees are too big for what their wing size is, and they shouldn't be able to fly. And so because of that, Buzzy forgets how to fly, and he's like all scared because he's got to get back home to his mom and dad, and he's going to have to walk now because he doesn't know how to fly because bumblebees really can't fly. And then the whole story of the book is him then getting his ability to fly back and believing in his heart, because just because his head suddenly thought he couldn't fly, his heart knew that he still could. And so that's why I loved reading that book to Andy, because he would get anxious and nervous and he'd get too much in his head, and you'd have to get back to just believe with your heart and not worry about some of the stuff in your head. So that's why it's just a beautiful book overall.
It really is. It's so well done for kids. And it's like, honestly, like every parent's wish for their kid to just have hope
and
no fear. Yeah.
Right.
So.
And to just believe in your heart and not worry about what other people are saying. Just think about what you feel and the love that you have. So anyway, and it's so funny because I told my husband this and he's like, well, I'm sure they know about the book. They probably, that had to do with the name of the organization. And then when I wrote to you, you're like, you'd never heard of it. So that's why it was so great. It was so great for me to be able to introduce that to you because that makes it even more powerful. I think the Buzzy's Bee message.
Totally. Yes, absolutely. It was just, yes, for sure. Divine intervention. And when I got your email back, I just had chills and I'm like, you know what? This is so cool. Cause like I said, our organization is 5 years old and I'm just now starting to kind of spread the word and start the podcast circuit. So you're my first formal podcast.
Oh, wow. That's exciting too.
Even more so. Right.
Yeah. It was so meant to be. I was meant to be your first interview, I think.
Yes. Right. Yes.
So why don't we talk, first of all, about your son, Hudson, also known as Buzzy. So
yes,
I just want to hear all about him, and maybe we can talk about that nickname and how that even all came to be as well.
Sure. So my oldest son, Calvin, is quite a bit older, and he came along in our journey of marriage a little bit sooner than we had intended to. So we were going to wait a little bit in between kids, but then we experienced secondary infertility. So once we experienced secondary infertility, there was a lot of things that happened. I went to my OB for a scan just because it had been a couple years since we were trying. And I had, my son in like a rural area of Oregon on the Oregon coast. And then we had moved back to like the Portland metropolitan area. And so it was a new physician. And I just went in with the OB, the ultrasound technician. And she said, I'm curious if you had any help having Calvin, your first. And I said, no, like it wasn't planned, not at all. She's like, well, your uterus is extremely tilted. I said, oh, wow. And she like drew it on. She's like, there actually is no direct path. And I was like, wow, okay. So I'm like, where do we go from here? Well, I was in healthcare, but in sleep medicine. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and get those medical records from this rural hospital in Seaside, Oregon. And I don't really want to go too much into it, but basically it was an emergency C-section. They were panicked and my uterus got put in upside down.
Oh, okay.
So I, in fact, had no direct path. And so then I did a couple procedures and we were able to flip it. And I got pregnant with Hudson very quickly after that. At that point, my son was almost 5, my oldest one. And I wouldn't say it was like a perfect delivery, but I was so excited after just experiencing the infertility to be pregnant and have another boy. My husband, the minute we found out it was a boy, called his brother, and they were the same years apart. So my husband is the baby brother of his brother, Jason. And it was like the exact same, like 5 years apart, 2 boys, like just, So I just remember him being so excited, and we were so excited. Calvin didn't take to it 100%, having the long gap in between. He's like, really? Life is all about me. What are we doing here? What are we doing here, people?
And he's not going to be able to be fun. He's not going to be any fun.
Right. He's not fun, right? But he came and he had this full black head of hair, super fuzzy, every which way, just adorable. The initial delivery was a bit tough. It was a scheduled C-section. He came out and he had beautiful color initially. And then they said, oh, he doesn't have the meconium or doesn't have the stuff, the purpley white stuff on him. He's turning blue. So they took him with my husband to be on a CPAP machine, and it was good. There was no NICU at that hospital. I didn't really think there was no reason for me to believe that anything would go wrong. And it was fine. It ended up being fine. He was my smallest baby, but he got so big. Like he was just the chubbiest little, he was like a tank at 3 months old. And I was buying like 9 and 12-month-old clothes. And he just had this huge black head of hair and he was like this big old tank guy. And he was just so happy and so amazing. He was so happy. He just rolled with it. He just went along with everything we wanted to do. And it was hard having the gap, right? It's like, Hudson doesn't care if we go to the zoo. He's 6 months old, but we bundled him up and he was just happy to look at everything, right? And he went to all Calvin's football games, and he just did everything. We just plopped him in the stroller and off we went with everything. And he was great. He always was super charismatic, super happy. Yeah, just great to be around.
So talk about the nickname.
Okay. So, like I said, he was born with a full head of hair, and it was Huddy Buddy initially, but then it was like started talking about his fuzzy hair. So we called him Buzz Fuzz a lot. And this was stuck the whole time. And then towards the end, it wasn't like we dropped the fuzz, because at this point he had like a long head of hair, and he was Buzzy. We just called him Buzzy, and he was just happy and cheery and like a bumblebee, and just that's what we always called him.
Yeah, you said your husband just likes to have nicknames for kind of everybody, and
oh yeah, no, like from the minute he was a kid, I have a bazillion of them. My kids have a bazillion of them. In his short 13-month life, I think Hudson had, those are the ones that stand out now, but had probably 15 of them. And even inanimate objects. I mean, soft is Subby, cereal is Sir. I mean, it's just weird. I mean, but it's endearing, and it's his way of connecting with people. And it's funny because my husband is also a huge guy. He's 6'7". And so it's like, he's this giant, like, and it's very endearing, but some of them are not always wanted nicknames, but for the most part, they're.
But Buzzy was a cute one, an awesome one.
It was a great one. Yeah. Yes.
So he was doing pretty well then, right? He had a little bit of a rough entry, but then he was fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally fine. I mean, the regular stuff, he never really did a traditional daycare, kind of a little bit towards the end, and had the cold, had hand, foot, mouth, probably 6 weeks before he passed away. But just, I mean, the regular daycare crud, right? Yeah. Like just the stuff that everybody gets, it's nothing that ever felt super out of the ordinary.
Mm-hmm. So why don't you go into talking about what happened with Hudson then?
Yeah, for sure. So my son had a birthday party here at the Chuck E. Cheese type place. And Hudson wasn't feeling 100%, but there was no fever, and he kind of had a runny nose and just kind of off, a little lethargic towards his bubbly personality. And he came home, and I realized he was teething, so he was super snotty. And my cousin was in town for the birthday party. And I was originally just thinking, we're just going to go home and have a quiet night. But she was in town from Seattle, and she came over with my husband's good friend, and we were just hanging out, and he just was not going down. So eventually I gave him a Highlands teething tablet. I put him down, and he eventually fell asleep, but I nursed him for probably an hour. Normally that was like a 20-minute affair. Mm-hmm. And so he was down, and we were co-sleeping. So he went down, but I came back out and eventually went to bed when I was just like completely tired. And I think it was definitely a cold making its rounds. So like I said, I was nursing, and he always woke up at 4 a.m. to nurse. And biological time clock to this day, I woke up and he had not woken up, and it was 4:15 in the morning. And I was like, oh, maybe he's just sleeping. He was on top of the covers at the end of the bed with his head facing towards the end of the bed. And I picked him up, and our room is really dark. We actually don't have any overhead lighting. And I walked into the hallway, and he was not breathing. Yeah. And I just started frantically yelling. And those friends that were over had spent the night in our guest room, and my husband and his friend Ray spent over 15 minutes training off giving him CPR. And I had to walk away. So I left, and I just felt like the ambulance was taking forever. And they were being coached by 911 on the proper method for CPR, and stayed with it the whole time. There's these little things that come back. Like later, it was on my cousin's phone, and she said, I had 1% battery. That should have never happened. Like the phone should have never lasted. And, so they were coached, and I just remember standing in a nightgown in my driveway, just wailing, like waiting for them to come. And my older son was there and visibly shaken. And he was taken to my grandparents' house with my cousin. And yeah, so he perfectly healthy, other than, the typical baby stuff, and just unexpectedly passed in the middle of the night. And later we were connected to the SUDC Foundation.
So sudden unexplained death in childhood.
Death in childhood. Yep. So that was the start of our very long journey, but yeah, still incredibly traumatic. I feel like the 6 weeks leading up to Hudson's death date or angelversary or whatever you want to call it, I relive that in my dreams every single night. And it has never gone away. Every year I'm like, maybe I can, I just think to the universe, maybe I could just do this one night instead of every night for 6 weeks leading up to that day. But so far it's consistent. I mean, part of me is thankful for the memories, I guess. But it was very traumatic.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And this has been 5 years ago now?
Yes, he will in May 15th, it will be 6 years. Yeah.
May 15th, you said?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Andy died on the 15th too, the 15th of August. And somehow the 15th always just doesn't seem the same after that, even any month for some reason. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
So then I'm sure you had to go through the autopsy and all of that business too, because you desperately want to know why, right? You want to know what happened. And
So there's a caveat.
Yeah.
So we were so traumatized. My husband rode in the ambulance with Hudson to the hospital. I was driven by the friend.
Mm-hmm.
And it was 4:45 in the morning. So there was no traffic on a Sunday morning. And we get there and I'm not far behind, but my husband said there was nobody there. Yeah. Waiting at it, and so they knew, right? He just kept saying there was nobody there waiting to help him. There was nobody there to save him. And so they had not known, they could do everything they could.
Yeah.
And he was just, laying there, but because there was nothing, there was no accident, there was no noted of medical issues, they sent in investigators to the hospital. Mm-hmm. So before we even got to see a chaplain, they started pulling Nate and I off one by one with a sheriff. We interviewed with a coroner and the lead detective of the sheriff's department. And then the coroner said, after a very intense interrogation, what level of autopsy would you like to receive? There's one that is required by the state. Mm-hmm. There is one that would give us a little more information. And then the third level, cremation, will be the only option.
Oh. Wow.
And in that moment, I have some Catholic roots. And I know this is not true for all Catholicism, and I'm definitely not practicing, but kind of in this Roman Catholic perspective, it's actually a sin to be cremated. Mm-hmm. So I had this idea of he has to be buried. I'm not going to let him, if there is a God or whatever is happening in divine, I'm not going to let him go to hell just because I chose that I needed to know more. And that was just, just level whatever is required.
Yeah. Well, and you don't know. I mean, these are such ridiculous decisions to have to make in that kind of moment anyway. Right. It
was just terrible. And I remember that chaplain, just walking in, handing us a quilt and walking out. It felt so cold. So and I was in a wheelchair. I was puking. There was just I could not even get my own thoughts straight.
Right. Of course not.
And so just to have to make these decisions. And then I wish that I known that we could have turned away the investigators. We had 48 hours. We had certain things that were not required to do before we left the hospital. We also could have had them keep the body, for lack of better terms, on ice and made that decision on the autopsy later. And we just had none of that information.
No, of course you didn't. I mean, there's no reason for you to have ever known any of that.
Right. Right. But I mean, I did go down the rabbit hole. So I mentioned in the story that night I gave him Highland's teething tablets, and they're obviously not regulated by the FDA because they're a homeopathic teething tablet aside from Orajel. And 2 weeks after he passed, there was traces of arsenic found in Highland's teething tablets. And so I sent that into the lab and all the things. Right. And he, it was a rabbit hole that I, in some ways, went down for sure, but it wasn't ever much further than that. And actually at the time said an unexplained death in childhood was not a coded behavior or a coded diagnosis in the state of Oregon. Yeah. And so that actually just came through this October. There was a lobby for it. And so it's just now that, and everything is just coded as asphyxiation.
Yeah. And that's hard because that just feels different, right? That feels like somehow it was somebody's fault. When you think about asphyxiation, that's what it seems like. So that's good that that's a more accepted term now in Oregon. It seems weird that they didn't have that before. I wonder if other states are like that as well. I don't even know.
There's a few. So I do obviously have my own, so I'm not the world's best ambassador, but I am an ambassador for the SUDC Foundation here in Oregon. And it is, there was a few. I think we were one of like 4 or 5 that were left to go ahead and see that code through. So,
so talk about what your journey has been like since that time, and what you've done, because you are now doing some pretty amazing things. But
thank you.
Let's just talk about kind of how that came about, because it doesn't all of a sudden pop up to Buzzy's Bees organization. There's a process. Right.
Yes, for sure. I actually listened, Marcy, to your podcast earlier of your 100th episode of just the Q&A with you and your husband. And one thing that I thought was really amazing is you went through all these names of these wonderful people that stood by your side, that did really amazing things. And our family really rallied for us. And I planned the funeral, people flew in, and they were just our advocates. And had we had a roadmap, maybe things would have been different at the hospital, but the hospital was so traumatic that they just like, okay, well, we're going to take control now. Like, we're going to forge ahead. This is going to be done properly. So the funeral was planned, things happened and just fell into place. And I later heard that some of that was definitely a struggle, but I had an immense amount of support. I had a friend, Tina, as well, that was boarding a cruise in Seattle, and she woke up, she got there and she was parking at my other good friend's house. And she was about to board this cruise ship, and Kaylin, and they weren't friends, they were kind of from 2 different walks of life, came out and said, I just got off the phone with Andrew, which is my dad, and Hudson's dead. And so they kind of consult each other, and she's like, I don't know, do I get on the cruise, do I not get on the cruise? And she was with her partner, and they said, you know what, we're here already, there's a lot of people at home. But the minute she got back from that, it was like nonstop, right? So she could fill in where these other people had been here that week. And now we live a couple miles from each other, and she had a daughter at the time that played a ton with Hudson. They were only like a few years apart, and so it just, it transcends. And then my sister-in-law flew in right away from Seattle. She's now the secretary and board member of our organization. She does so much, and she just made things happen. And, right after Hudson passed away, her other sister-in-law ended up getting breast cancer, but and I remember her saying, oh, it's the season of Beth. And then I really absorbed it. I'm like, you know what? All these things you're doing, you showed up for me. It was a season of Nate and I. If we had said get in the car, because she was in the middle of moving to Seattle, which is a 3-hour drive, she was there every weekend. She's like, what do you want to do today? Do you want to, just that one that takes you for the walk. So my sister-in-law, Julie, who was just instrumental. I had other friends that just showed up to cry. My friend Danielle, she lived an hour and a half away, and she later kind of did a lot of the print for Buzzies, so people kind of fell in that line, but just cried. And she's just like, I can't, it's the worst thing.
Didn't that mean so much to you though?
so much.
Because I just can't even say enough about how much it means for somebody to show up and cry with you, because they feel like that's the wrong thing. And everyone would think that's the wrong thing. And before Andy died, I would have thought that's the wrong thing. Like, the last thing I should do is show up and cry with somebody. But that's what you need, right? I mean, it's so hard if somebody comes in and like, let's go do this, that they're trying to cheer you up. That's not what you need.
Right.
You need someone to sit with you in the dark place and not be scared.
Right. And it's the empathy. I mean, that's true empathy.
Yeah.
And I think so many people think like, oh, I'm not going to show up and cry because like they're already sad. Am I going to make them sad if I cry? Or this is their loss, not my loss. Why am I crying? That's so stupid. But really, it's like truly like that's the impact of our kiddos, right? Like we need to know that they've touched lives to the point that we've been, it's like this give and this take. And it's like, if I'm the only one walking around crying, it's like, what's wrong with you?
Right.
But if somebody's doing it side by side, it's like, yeah, this is huge.
It makes me think of my Buzzy book again a little bit, and like, get out of your own head and just trust your heart. Because if your heart is wanting to cry, that's okay.
Right.
Sit with her, cry with her. Don't let your head tell you something different, that what your heart should or shouldn't be feeling, or what you should or shouldn't do. Just go with what is feeling like the right thing, Right.
Yes. Follow your heart. I think whenever you're trying to support people, follow your heart, stop questioning, what's next. Right. And I think, as much as we talk about people that did the right thing, there also are people that did the wrong thing. And bereaved parents, just by voicing, wow, that was a really crappy thing to say, or that was a really crappy thing to do, it doesn't mean do nothing.
Yeah, right.
If it comes from a place of your heart, if it comes from your heart, if it comes from your inner being, and you truly love that person, they'll say, later, we'll talk about how that was really weird for me. But it's coming from a genuine place. You don't ever fault somebody that's really trying to do things from a place of heart and caring.
Yes.
And
I'd rather have somebody say the wrong thing than say nothing, for sure.
Right.
Because if you say the wrong thing, now we can talk about how it was the wrong thing. But if you say nothing, then what do? If you're saying nothing to me, then I feel like I can't say anything at all. Like, we haven't even started a conversation. I'd just rather have it start badly than have it not start.
For sure. Yeah. So I think that for me in the beginning, it was really kind of this network of friends. My husband and I did grieve very differently. His brother really showed up for him. I mean, they did the same thing. So they're both in financial planning. And so, their life insurance, and, so it's like his brother and his brother's other partner at work just took Nate's book and just did it. But even if he was driving to an appointment, he would just like, nope, turning the car around, I'll be 10 minutes late for this appointment. Like anything he needed, he was just, people just showed up. So his brother, and then the folks that were there that night. So my cousin, Candace, I was just on a trip with my aunts and my cousin. And it's those realizations later, like she's the one that does not shy away from it. Like she lives in Seattle. She texts me every death date, every birthday, every single time she's having a hard time. Because we know it was hard. I mean, she's not even married or having kids, and she's literally watching the worst thing unfold.
Yeah.
Everybody's worst nightmare. She's watching it happen, and she continued to show up. I did what I could to show up for her. She always like texts or calls or even says like, hey, I'm having a really hard time.
Yeah. But
this Facebook memory popped up, and it's me holding Hudson in the hospital when he was 1 day old.
Yeah.
It's like, so it's these people, and there's quite an age gap for kids, 10 and 15. That's a weird age gap. And now we're to the point where, as you get older, those things don't matter. And I'm so thankful for that time together and how it's bridged our friendship, because I don't think we'd ever talk as much as we do or be there for each other as much as we're able to without having this kind of really unfortunate thing in the background. Right.
Yeah. And you just wonder why things happen when they happen, things like that. But I mean, it was a blessing for you that she was there with you that night.
Oh,
and she
yeah.
was able to, even though as traumatic as it was for her and how I'm sure you wish she wouldn't have had to witness that, for her to have been in that space with you,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's
Right.
nothing that compares to that.
No, no.
No.
And so it was, and so it was a lot of people, it was a lot of people showing up. Even at one point, we did do couples counseling, and we tried. The first couple people we went to was horrible.
We had a really bad one too.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. No joke. It was like, we sat down on the couch. She said she did grief. And we say, our son just passed away 3 weeks ago, unexpectedly in the middle of the night. How does that make you feel? And honestly, I still remember this to this day, even in the biggest fog that I was in. My husband stands up and walks out and says, I think we're done. And I said, I think we're done. Like, I'm going to follow him.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't think that works for us.
It's funny how we could both kind of laugh about it a little bit, because we went too. So I'm a pediatrician, obviously, and so our complex care coordinator decides she's going to arrange counseling for everyone because she doesn't know what to do, right? Everyone wants to do something.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to arrange counseling for everyone. So everyone in our family had a counselor within days, I think. So yeah, my husband and I showed up too, and it was this couples counselor lady, and we were sitting on the couch, and she crouched down, like she was like crouched in front of us, like so that she could be closer, I think. But it was really weird because I'm thinking to myself, that can't be comfortable, right? She was like in a catcher position as a baseball player pretty much the whole time. It was just very bizarre and just felt weird. And we got done, and my husband like looks at me and says, we are never going back there again. Like, okay, we are never going back there again. And what's funny, I don't know her name. They never even sent us a bill. So I don't even know. I have no idea what happened with any of it, but it's just weird. And you just need to find what's right for you. And that was clearly not right for us. And just
no. And I mean, but nobody was stopping. Right. And so the person we ended up finding the next person, there was these people. And so my aunt is a social worker here in Portland, and she started calling this woman every single day and said, I know you're full, but you have got to take my niece. And it's like divine intervention when somebody is so casual, right? So we show up in her office in a high rise in downtown Portland, and she says, okay, you're here, spill it. Because her practice was closed. She's ready to retire. She's like, and that for us was like, that's real, right? Yeah. She's like, okay, you made your way to the sofa. I'm here. This is what I do. I only do grief counseling. She was an incredible human and said, okay, you're here. I have all your back notes. Spill it. What do you want to talk about? It just was like, okay, perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's awesome when it just works out like that. Because with my lady that I ended up with too, she was a grief counselor. And I had 3 people tell me about her. And it was finally with number 3, I was like, okay, this is the 3rd person that's given the exact same name. I think I probably should call her. And she too was closed, but she got my phone call. I left a message. She got my phone call. She called me back and she said, I've been waiting for you to call me. I've been praying that you would call me someday. And it had been months after Andy died. But she just knew, because I had sent, in pediatrics, I had sent patients to their practice, and she actually sent a book called Tear Soup to my office and to my home. I didn't know that was her for months, actually. She didn't tell me that she was the one that sent me the book until we were far into counseling. But it's funny how it just was like meant to be, to work out that way. And, I can't explain it any other way except that had that 3rd person not told me, I'm not sure that I would have done it, because I was very turned off by the first woman. Then we did kind of do a grief support, which seemed good. And it is good. It was good. But I did need more than that. But I didn't think I needed more than that at the time. Right. Well, and here
totally. And here we have the Dougie Center, which is like, we're all famous, and, childhood bereavement. And my son went through it, and we went through it too. Initially, when my son started, they offer an adult group as a bystander. And unique to this situation, because they serve all kids through all types of bereavement, it was the siblings group. So everybody that was in the adult group was a parent or a primary caregiver who had lost a child, right? And so it was like, it centered a little bit more on truly what we did need. And we didn't go upstairs initially. My husband said, I'm not going to walk up those stairs and listen to all these sad stories and all these bad things that can happen to our only living child.
Oh.
And I said,
okay.
I get that. Well, then we kept progressing with Jill, and she said, in my experience, people who truly take the next step in their grief journey receive some sort of group support. And I was like, okay. And so the next week we do it together. We walk up those stairs, and my goodness, Nate's the one that talks the whole time. I'm like, it's somebody else's turn, like patting him on the knee, like we need to, and it was the best thing. And really, when it's all led by the kid, when Calvin was ready to, they call it close, they do a rock ceremony and close, I was like, are you sure? Because that meant we had to close.
Yeah.
So I was like, are you sure? Are you sure? And, and I had told to our group leader, I said, is this normal? She goes, oh, the parents are never done. She's like, they would do this, she's like, eventually you just got to let go. And I said, okay, I'll find other ways. But that 2 years that we did that was, it was the best thing. And it ended up being, and we did it really consistently, very heavy for a year.
Yeah.
And I think for me, the best thing about that, there was another couple who had lost their 14-year-old son, and they had 2 kids that attended. They were around Calvin's age, and to see them 5 years down the line in their journey, even though they're still there at 5 years, standing straight up and accomplishing goals was the best gift that I felt like I ever received from a perfect stranger. I mean, eventually they weren't strangers, but it was like, they just seeing them as a couple come together and forge that path and continue to live.
Yeah.
And continue to be, I was, it was just seeing that other, it just, yeah.
Ours that we go to is Starlight Ministries. And now I actually facilitate a virtual support group that they do, but they have about a 2-year curriculum too. So it's similar in that, not that you can't go longer, but the goal is kind of, it's a 2-year kind of curriculum. Right. And Stephanie, who's now employed by Starlight Ministries, she was in that very first grief group that I was in, and she lost her 12-year-old, and she was 1 year further along than me, almost 13 months. So just over a year longer. And from that moment on, every time I did something, I'd always look and think, well, you know what? Stephanie did this. Because I see somebody that's 1 year further than me, and I think, if Stephanie can do it, maybe I can too. And it's just so helpful to be able to see somebody just a little bit further along, to give you a little bit of hope that this is what I can do. If she can do it, so can I. And just having that someone to model, even though you're both going through this horrific experience and you're crying together and doing all this together, I still can look at her in a way knowing that it gives me a little bit of hope.
Right. Totally. Yes, totally. It was instrumental, I think, in us even, our marriage, like seeing somebody else do it ahead of you and saying, like, this does not have to be the end.
Right. Because it's scary.
Oh, for sure. It's so scary. It's like you just lost your kid and now you're doing this thing. And any person experiences emotions different. Men and women experience emotions different. Marriages do things, but it's this super emotional tragedy that now you're dealing with. And men and women do things differently. And you're just watching each other walk on these separate paths.
Right. Because you can walk on it, you can be on the path together, but it's going to look different for each of you.
Right.
It can't be the same, and you're not doing the same things. And just as you felt like on that first day, while your husband's talking all the time, I felt a little bit that too, because we show up to this support group. I'm the one that arranged it all, right? We all go and the kids go and they go to their own group and we go to our group and we're there like 10 minutes. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't belong here. I don't belong here. I need to get out of here. I don't want to be here. This is not right for me. And I'm panicky, right? Thinking, this is not good because it was really early. It was 3 weeks. It was super early. And we walked out and Eric's like, that was really good. We need to go back. Okay.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
I thought, okay. That's not what I was feeling right now, but okay. And so then I started going back really because he did it. And my kids too were a little bit taken aback. They weren't not wanting to do it right away. And I had to say to each of them, you know what? This is really good for your dad and really important for your dad. So we're going to keep on going and you're going to pretend like it's okay with you for right now until hopefully at some point it's not pretending anymore and you really do appreciate it.
Right. No, totally. Yeah. I think that's, they didn't really tell you, it's just like any other therapy, how your kid was truly doing.
Right.
But they did say to us, Calvin's really quiet, but we really feel like he's absorbing. And when he does share, it's super insightful for a 6-year-old.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, so he's getting what he needs out of this then, he's getting, what he needs and it's worth the journey because it is in our city. We live in the suburbs and it's a journey in rush hour traffic. And I remember those early years just going, and then you have to get dinner out. It just was a huge, new thing that we had to add to our budget and add to our weeks, because it was every other week. And it was the way there, it was a 45-minute to hour and a half drive, depending on traffic.
I mean, that's a big commitment. Yeah.
But it was a commitment. Yeah, it was a commitment, but there was no other choice. If he wanted to go, then everybody kept going,
right.
And yeah. Right.
So, well, then I'm glad it ended up being good for everyone in the long run.
It was great. It was great. They're incredible. It was an incredible place and they do an amazing job with, that's, they're great. Yeah.
So talk about Buzzy's Bees now. When did that start in the whole history?
Yeah. So honestly, which is weird. So I have a history of a marketing and event planning background. And so both me and my husband pretty early on, which I was surprised by my husband's, was we should do a memorial golf tournament. He's a golfer, and he knows that I would plan an event 100 times if I could, and I don't know about this type of event, but I was like, okay. So we're like, okay, we're going to do a yearly golf tournament. And then we're like, but we want it to be family focused. So we said, okay, we're going to do a miniature golf tournament.
Okay.
And then we started going down the rabbit hole of what organization did we want to support? And there's so many wonderful ones, but my heart is not with research. There's so many things and it's they do amazing, tangible things, but oh, by the way, we're giving 30% to research too. Oh, by the way, we're giving, it's okay. I don't know. It wasn't what I wanted to do.
I totally hear you because with me, it was everyone saying, you need to go testify in the state capitol on laws against distracted driving or whatever. You know what? That's great and all good cause to do. That's not where my heart is. My heart is not there.
No.
And if someone else's heart is there, great. Because we do need to have safe roads and whatever. And people do need to not be distracted when they're driving. But that's not my calling. So you doing, getting on the research bandwagon wasn't your calling. It's for some people, but yeah. And it's a lot of freaking work. Yeah. So if you're going to do something and it's not your calling and you're obviously doing it for free, you're like, man, my heart is not in this, it's not working. Right. And so, like I said, in the very beginning, we received so much support that I thought to myself, if somebody could receive the fraction of support that we had received, and I can do it for one person a year, and there should be no strings. There should be a connection. There should be this thing. And so we were gifted a year of pro bono attorney services just to kind of see where it went. And we said, okay, I'm like, here's what I want. I want people to come to me. I want them to fill out an application or I want them to
come by us by way of mouth. And when they fill out a super basic application, I don't even want to take a death certificate. I just want to know about this person. And right in the beginning stages, we want to give them unrestricted funds. Mm-hmm. So I just want to give them a check and say, pay for counseling, pay for groceries, pay for a funeral, pay for a pedicure if that's what you need. But if you don't have the extra resources for a little extra time off, the counseling bill, whatever, like do what you need. The attorney said, that doesn't exist. You have to give, there has to have a path. You can't just give money away. And I said, okay, but I think you should try. And he put in these pages and pages of incorporation paperwork for the 501c3. And he called us and he goes, you're never going to believe this. You need to come down here right now and sign these papers. They're going to let you do it. But okay. Perfect. I knew they would. No, I really didn't. I was like, whatever.
But it seems like they should, right? I mean,
yeah,
like,
right.
You just went through the most horrible thing in your whole life. Right. If somebody wants to give you money because you just went through this horrible experience, there should not be a reason that you can't donate money for that purpose. Right? That makes sense.
It makes sense to me.
Right.
Like the least amount of red tape possible. They don't need to fill out an find a death certificate. So that was so that was in November of 2016, we got incorporated. Mm-hmm. Hudson had passed in May of 2016. We officially launched in January of 2017 with a big auction gala thing. And those first years, we were pretty slow to grow. Like we were pretty, 1 or 2 applications a year, but it was okay because I was still very much in my grieving process. We did the miniature golf tournament. It was phenomenal. People all came together. We in some ways memorialize this really horrible thing that happens because he was a little over 13 months old. It happens every year between his birthday, which is April 4th and May 15th. So in that 6-week time period, it's like my grief season or that bad, terrible season. It happens. And it's something that I get to come together for him every year, that particular event. So then I kind of got to know this SUDC Foundation. I found out up in Seattle, Washington, there was a walk around Green Lake for a little boy named Jackson. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to go do this thing. And everybody's begrudgingly going to go up to Seattle and we're going to walk Green Lake in honor of this sweet little 2.5-year-old boy that passed away. And they honored all the kids. So we registered ahead of time. There was a flower ceremony. It was so beautiful. And I just started walking this path. And all of a sudden I'm talking to these people and they had just lost their son 3 months before that walk. Oh. They were incredible humans. She's like this really strong woman who manages a team at Boeing. And then her husband's like a huge bigwig at Amazon. And they're walking and they're talking. And I'm thinking, how are you guys doing this? And people did that for me too. Like, how are you standing? And it's like, you just got to do it, right? And
you just do. You don't have a choice.
You just do.
Yeah, there's no choice.
You just do. But I was like, and they're just saying all the bad things and all the good things. But all these, and their story was very unexpected, but not unexplained. So a little bit different than, the world that I had kind of divulged myself in. And their son was a very similar age to Hudson. And it was just like, Lincoln you could just tell this beautiful soul. They just were pouring their hearts out. And I realized in that moment, and people had said this before, like, I just want to talk about my kid without being uncomfortable. And I also want to talk about their life. I am so done talking about the way that they died.
Yep.
I'm so done. And so we do this walk. It's a pretty hard day. We get back and everybody I'm walking with my sister-in-law, Julie, my good friend, Kaylin, where the other friend had parked in front of her house, all these people. And we go and we have a great meal. Then we all basically go back and nap. And I basically wake up from the nap and say, I have an idea. I'm so ready for Julie to shut it down. I said, I have this idea. And it just keeps coming to a head. So early on, the other huge thing that happened to me early on in our grief is at Hudson's funeral. My husband had these very long time family friends called the Reitmeyers. And one of the daughters, Lisa, came and she said, I don't have much to offer you, but I would love to help you tell Hudson's story. I'm a writer. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay, crazy lady, my son just died. I don't know why you would, what, and then later, as Nate and I are doing the couples counseling, we're doing the Dougie Center, and I am just spinning. My world is spinning, and I do have a ton of support. And he goes, we've tried everything traditional. I think that you should take Lisa up on her offer. Mm-hmm. And so this was 8 weeks after Hudson passed away. We're sitting on her patio for 4.5 hours. She's recording me just talk about him. Yeah. And 2 or 3 months later, she sends me this note, and I'll never forget opening that email. And it said, friend, this was the hardest thing I ever have written, but I hope that it brings you some comfort. Mm-hmm. And it was this beautiful 2,000-word story about my narrative, and it served as a timestamp of where I was then, how much I've grown, but truly who he was, mm-hmm. and how much I believed in him. And so I backtracked a little bit, but I wake up from this nap, and I said, I have an idea. And Julie goes, okay. I said, how we're always talking about how everybody's supposed to talk about their kids and nobody wants our money? I mean, honestly, and she said, yes. I said, what if we do the same thing for other people that Lisa offered to me? Mm-hmm. And we just let them talk about their kids. Yeah. And then she's like, okay. And so then I said, but there's got to be something more, because the secondary thing that every person talks about is how they have no new memories of their kid. Mm-hmm. And I said, how do we make that happen? How do we give them a new memory? So then I said, there's got to be something with art. And so Give Grief a Voice was born. So it's a project where we hire an artist. We have 3 writers now. Lisa is our first writer, and then we hire a writer, we sit down, and we let them, people who have unexpectedly lost a child, talk about their kids. And then after that 1 to 2 hour interview is over, and it's very much led by them. We pull up a commission book, and they choose an artist based on the visuals of these artists that have done commissions in the past. And then their story at their approval is sent to an artist who commissions an art piece based on the story that they have told.
It's just so beautiful.
Right. So it's not always a portrait. Sometimes the kiddo appears in the thing, but it's all the collaboration of their grief journey mixed with every memory they've ever had with their kid, and all this beautiful symbolism. Mm-hmm. And they're all so powerful. At the end of that year, COVID's made it a little more challenging. We had our 3rd season last season, where we downsized the event and just let the families come. Mm-hmm. And we're a national organization, so anybody throughout the United States, and we have a few people in Canada as well, can apply to participate in the project. And we do an art reveal. So all the families come together, everybody that had participated that year, and they see their art for the very first time and meet all the other families who have participated within that year. So it's a really magical, heavy, but incredibly powerful room and energy. It's just, every single year have no words. I mean, now it's like time for the founder to get up there and talk about, and I'm just like, it's a thank you. Like every single time we go to the interview, everybody's just so thankful to me and thanking me. I go, thank you. Like, it is an honor to carry your child with me. It is truly an honor to get to hear your story. I'm a complete stranger to you. Mm-hmm. And everything that you're saying and doing is absolutely correct. And thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. And oftentimes because every single one of those kiddos I think about all the time. And so I often refer to them as so-and-so's parents. They're not addressed as Lincoln or Braxton or Molly's parents anymore. Yeah. And that's how I hold them in my heart. I'm like, I hope you're okay with it, but you will always be Andy's mom and dad. Like, to me, that's who you are. Like, that's such a fixture to who we are as beings.
I just think you listening to you is like listening to myself and what I do, because it's the same thing, except mine is just, telling the stories in their own words, to be forever on the internet and forever online to memorialize them. I love doing the artwork with it. I only wish you didn't limit it to 12 and under, because my Andy was 14.
Stay tuned.
If you ever go up, you let me know.
There's some big things being shaken up. Yeah, I will.
It's just so beautiful.
Yeah.
And so powerful. I just love what you're doing. I cannot.
Oh.
I am so honored to share it with my listeners, and I can think of people like off the top of my head that I want to contact you like right away, because I just feel like it's just will be amazing for them as well.
Yeah, it's such an incredible journey, and really it is a journey. And then in the end, there's certain questions that we do ask to drive the conversation, and it's similar to the things that you asked, but we hope to, or we will publish a book with all the stories and the artwork side by side. And it's not only to support families that are grieving, because we, like I said, you're lucky to have the grief center that you went to. We're very lucky to have the grief center that we went to. Not everybody has access to that.
Yep.
There's a lot of people that live in very rural communities or even states that do not have the capacity or the things to do that. And our hope is that not only will it serve that community, and if we have 50 stories, hopefully one story truly speaks to somebody else, they feel less alone. Because if this is how, I've met so many people now just by voicing it, but every single person also says it's the loneliest thing they've ever did. Well, if this is happening as much as it is, how come we're all still lonely? How come we don't have language within the culture to do this, right? And so, but also to serve the community, trying to support those people. Hopefully, if you wanted to, you could open the book and just go to each quote and say the best thing somebody ever said or did to me, and the worst thing somebody ever said or did to me. We ask that question every single time. And it's like, it's a guidebook. Like, what could you do to support your friends and family that are experiencing the worst thing? But also, what could you maybe not say? Because people truly are scared to say the wrong thing, even though you and I, as bereaved parents, saying something is better than nothing. People truly are scared. That's a human. You're human. You're like, I'm not going to be the one that ends up in the book that did the worst thing.
Right. Yeah. But really, truly, the worst thing should be doing nothing. That should be what everyone says is the worst thing. It's not what comes to your mind, but it truly is. Right.
Yeah, totally.
Well, Amanda, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and sharing. I just know that you are blessing so many people, and I can't wait to see all that you accomplish in the future.
Oh, well, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to be here today. So thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. If you found this helpful and would like to support the podcast, please leave a 5-star rating and comment. To help financially, you can text Andy's Mom to the number 53555 or visit the donate page on andysmom.com. Your donations are secure and tax deductible, and we are now able to accept Venmo, PayPal, and Apple Pay. Always Andy's Mom is a registered 501c3 organization and can receive donations through smile.amazon.com, Thrivent Financial, and Benevity, amongst others. Marcy loves hearing from listeners. Please feel free to reach out to her via email at marcy@andysmom.com. Also, be sure to sign up for the email list to receive weekly updates as well as pictures of all of Marcy's guests and their children. Together, let's work to inspire hope, one day at a time.